to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, the new year is here, and with it come new subjects to dissect, to discuss, to mull over. You see, too much time gets spent in the YouTube boxing community discussing the same old fighters in regards to the same old subjects that really don't get anybody anywhere, you understand. It's very easy to sit there pumping out videos about the same 5 or 6 fighters you're a fan of, which is what we see from most of these YouTube authors. You know, just regurgitating the same old shit day in, day out, caping for their favorite fighter or their favorite banner, and it's utterly ridiculous that this is the kind of coverage this beloved sport gets. But we here at The Relay hold ourselves to a higher standard. And it just so happens that there are some very exciting prospects coming out of the land down under, that which is close to it, that I think deserve a little bit more attention. So let's give it to them. We'll start off with a fighter that hails from out of New South Wales, Australia, that goes by the name of Ebony Bridges, who debuted as a pro in February of last year. Currently sports a professional record of 3-0 with 2 KOs fighting out of the bantamweight division. And what you can immediately notice about Ebony, also known as the Blonde Bomber, is that she has a very good aesthetic, and that aesthetic could make for commercial appeal. The kind of commercial appeal that, you know what, it can open doors. It does help to have that kind of appeal working for you in unison with what actual skills you have. And I must say that Ebony Bridges does have some skills that are worth taking stock of. This isn't just a pretty face.
Got more going on than just that.
The best way to describe Ebony Bridges' base style is as a boxer-puncher that really does lean towards the punching, fighting out of a high guard and skillfully staying off the center.
She don't just stand there.
Whilst firing the jab. You'll notice that whenever Ebony lets the left hand go, she leans off to the right as to not still be standing there for whatever may come back at her.
She's crafty.
Very similar to the implementation of the jab we see from the WBC champion at bantamweight, Barbie Juarez, who also angles her torso whilst firing the jab as to make sure to stay off the center so she's not in line for any counter shots. The right hand of Ebony Bridges definitely seems to pack a punch. I know that it's very early in her career, and like most prospects in this stage of their career, the level of competition is a bit pedestrian. We'll see if that right hand of hers stays in character as she progresses and steps up in competition. But from the looks of things, when she gets off those straight shots, when she unholsters that right hand, there does seem to be a whole lot of mustard on it. And for a fighter that's only been in 3 professional contests, she really does have a good pro style. She's not like these amateurs that go out there going for activity, you know, throwing all these flurries that don't necessarily have very much on them. You know, Ebony Bridges does have the look of an experienced fighter, in spite of only being 3-0 as a pro. She's got good reflexes, good situational awareness, doesn't compromise defense for offense. She's got a good enough balance of the two that while she's inching forward, applying pressure on her opponent, she's not getting hit with shots that she doesn't need to get hit with, and she's still effective. She still knows how to land the right hand. Now, in the sport of women's boxing, the lower you go, the deeper the talent pool becomes, and that's very much the case in the bantamweight division. That's basically saying that regardless of which route Ebony Bridges goes to contend for a world title, there's a live animal at the end of that road. There's a live animal at the end of that route. There just so happen to be 2 pound-for-pound fighters, 2 pound-for-pound world champions in the bantamweight division that Ebony Bridges would have to contend against if she wanted to procure their version of the world title. There is Mariana Juarez from out of Mexico holding the WBC title. The very dangerous puncher, Daniela Bermudez of Argentina, holding the WBO title. Just as well, her Argentinian countrywoman, Maria Cecilia Roman, holds the IBF, with the WBA title being held by Venezuela's own Mayerling Rivas. Understand that there really is no path of least resistance here. There's relativity. Relatively speaking, some titles might be a little easier to win than others, but no matter which way you look, it's gonna be a fight to get your hands on one of your own. Now, it just so happens that Ebony Bridges is going to be making her U.S. pro debut on the undercard for Mary McGee versus Diana Hobbs in defense of Mary's IBF title, and Cristina Linar II versus Priska Vikot in contention for what is now the vacant 140-pound WBO title. Ebony is going to be fighting on the undercard. So keep your eyes peeled for the blonde bomber, Ebony Bridges, in early February on the 8th. And we're going to be doing more of these segments moving forward through 2020. Moving on. It was announced that lightweight prospect Golden Boy's new Golden Boy, Ryan Garcia, is going to be squaring off against a very familiar face, Francisco Fonseca, on February 14th, and this is just my reaction to the fight. This will be a common opponent between Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis, who he has so started calling out, and a common opponent between Ryan Garcia and Tevin Farmer. And in that way, you can see what the hierarchy of thought was when they put this fight together. They wanted Ryan to go in there with somebody who's been in there with some big names, some familiar faces, to see how Ryan fares against that guy, against what is a common opponent. Gets people talking if Ryan Garcia goes in there and dispatches Francisco Fonseca in better fashion than, say, Gervonta Davis did, or than, say, Tevin Farmer did. That's the rhyme and the reason. In truth, I had my heart set on a Jorge Linares fight. I was looking forward to that fight. I was ready for that fight because I think that it's about time that Ryan Garcia step it up a bit. And I'm not sure that Francisco Fonseca really is a step up from the kind of guys that he's been fighting. I mean, he destroyed Romero Duno, who some people wanted to believe Ryan was avoiding, Ryan was ducking. Yet Ryan went in there and he put that guy down, put that guy out. That's what happened. That's what happened in all of one round, folks. Off that kind of a victory, you know the fighter's flying high, feeling very confident, and it's in that moment that they need that step up in competition. I'm just not sure that that's what Francisco Fonseca necessarily is. I think they could have conjured up perhaps an Ivan Mendy, someone from the top 10, not necessarily the top 5, but, one of the top 10 guys at the weight, and that's really not Francisco Fonseca. Now, this is a card that Ryan Garcia is going to be headlining over there at the Honda Center in Anaheim, and the Honda Center seats about 18,000 to capacity. We hear a lot about Ryan Garcia's star power. We hear a lot about his potential, what he could be, and what he could be is about to be tested because this is his show. You're the main event. So we're going to see what kind of star power you've got. In truth, I don't put that much of a burden on the boy because
Still green.
He's just gone from a prospect to a contender. Okay, here he is fighting Francisco Fonseca, and he still is just a contender. Whereas when Gervonta Davis and Tevin Farmer fought Francisco Fonseca, they were actually reigning champions, defending champions. In the case of Ryan, he's not a full-fledged champion, not yet. So I don't put too much of a burden on this kid because, I reiterate, he just crossed over from prospect level to contender level. The bar of standard, as it were, the expectation of a world champion is a bit different from what you expect for a contender. Contenders are still making their bones, whereas champions establish themselves as such as world-level fighters, world-class fighters. Therein lies the difference, that when both Davis and Farmer fought this same guy, they were defending champions, whereas Ryan, he's a contender. I would have preferred to see Ryan fight Jorge Linares because I feel that Jorge brings more to the table than Francisco does. And I do feel like it's about time for Ryan to face a little bit more adversity. But, like I said, I'm not too hard on this kid because he still is just a contender.
Like it or not.
This fight can tell us a little more about where Ryan Garcia is, but it's one of those things to where if Ryan goes in there and blows this guy out of the water, it doesn't actually communicate very much. Now, if he were to go in there and blow Jorge Linares out of the water, okay, now you're cooking with rice. Now, that's saying something. It's just one of those things. So, just keep your eyes peeled for this on February 14th, and we'll see. We're going to find out just what kind of drawing power this kid's got. In other news, a very ballsy set of quotes from Anthony Joshua. Joshua is confident that he would blast out Wilder inside of 6 rounds. He was quoted as saying he wouldn't be there to do that in the 7th round. I would go in and knock him out. It's heavyweight against heavyweight, champion against champion. This is a serious fight, so I ain't going in there to try to outbox him for 12 rounds because of his punching power as well. I've got to go in there and take him out. don't let him get too comfortable in the ring with me. Joshua is not afraid of Wilder's power, despite the unbeaten puncher knocking out opponents with a single shot on a regular basis. Nah, not scary, but I know it's there, said Joshua.
You better.
There are certain punches. Some are like concussive, some are stinging, and some are like punches where they knock you out with one punch and you're out for the count. Wilder possesses that kind of power. It's about eliminating that power and just studying how to deal with it, really. One might be left to wonder how Anthony Joshua could contend with the power of a Deontay Wilder given what happened in the first Andy Ruiz fight. That he got hit with a punch he didn't see, and he never quite recovered from it. And it's safe to say that Deontay Wilder is a bigger puncher than Andy Ruiz. I mean, I think we can all agree on that, can't we?
Yeah.
That Wilder's a bigger puncher than Andy? Yeah, I think we can agree on that. In boxing, much like in life, it's the little things, you know? It's the little things that count. It's the little things that matter, and it's the little things that you've got to pay attention to. That while Deontay Wilder might be a far more concussive puncher than Andy Ruiz, what Andy Ruiz is capable of doesn't necessarily translate into what Deontay Wilder is capable of, and it's because of the little things. For starters, Andy and Deontay don't got the same physical dimensions by any stretch of the imagination. Deontay Wilder is a tall, athletic, and lanky fighter, whereas Andy Ruiz is a short, portly fellow. As a result of this, they do have different sweet spots. Andy Ruiz's sweet spot is mid-range to inside, where he can get off those quick hooks, those quick counters, whereas Deontay Wilder's sweet spot is from the outside coming in, when he can get full extension on the punch. You know, most people don't realize this, but a fighter's sweet spot, that's pretty important, because the whole time the fight is going on, they're working to get there. A fighter's sweet spot is just as relevant to the conversation as the fighter's physical dimensions and their athleticism and all these other characteristics. It's very relevant to the discussion. And
It's important.
what that basically means is that whatever Andy Ruiz is capable of, mid-range to inside, that doesn't translate into what Wilder is capable of, mid-range to inside, because both those guys are built differently, and they've got different sweet spots. So even if Andy had success, mid-range to inside, for whatever reason, that don't mean that's going to work for Wilder, because Wilder's sweet spot is where he can get full extension on his punch to generate that devastating power. So what happens if the man opposite the ring of him decides not to fight a long-range fight and decides to get in his chest? Guy like Wilder, tall guy, lots of reach. Guy like that's vulnerable, mid-range to inside. Those long arms are best suited when you can get full extension on them. But mid-range to inside, where a guy's got to shorten up those punches, fire some tight, compact hooks, it's difficult. Because the guy's arms are so long, there's actually room for a shot to sail around the guard.
But through it.
A lot of times you see these tall guys give up their height to what could be a smaller fighter. You know, they go trading, they go mixing it up on the inside. And the guy with the shorter arms actually has the advantage because he can fire the shorter shots from a shorter distance. And those shots, they tend to be more accurate.
They actually land.
Whereas the guy with the longer arms, he's firing off all these hooks that, you know, end up going behind a guy's head or sailing, you know, around the guy, as opposed to finding a home. Mid-range to inside, a portly fellow with shorter arms like Andy is actually quite dangerous. It's for this reason I characterized Anthony Joshua as getting greedy with his shots, because he actually gave his height up to the smaller man and lined himself up effectively for the smaller man's shots. But in the case of Deontay Wilder, if you go crowding that guy, if you get in that guy's chest, you neutralize his power. You smother it. You hear this said, and you hear this said often in reference to Deontay Wilder, that he's a one-handed fighter. That from the moment the fight starts, he's looking to land a single shot. This much is true. But in that way, that tells you that Deontay Wilder is not a volume puncher.
Nope.
He doesn't go out there, you know, putting together combinations and stringing shots together. It's not until he already has the guy hurt that he really lets his hands go. He is not a work rate guy.
What happens if you pressure
What if
him?
a guy goes crowding Deontay, trying to get close to him and stay close to him, work his body, get him to drop his hands, then land some shots upstairs? You know, Deontay Wilder, yeah, he's going to try to mix it up as best as he can, but that's not his desired range. That's not where he does his best work. Essentially, I think that Anthony Joshua's got the right idea that you can't go in there looking to box Deontay Wilder so much as find a balance between the boxing and the punching to get him out of there. The intention has to be knocking him out, not outboxing him like Joshua just did to Andy. No. With Wilder, you got to try to take him out. Question is, how do you do that against a guy with that kind of power, who can fire a single shot at any given moment in a fight that he might be losing, and still put you down, still put you out. How do you do it against a guy like that? I'll tell you how you do it.
Here's how you do it.
You know, you fire off that jab, and you double up on it. And this ain't the kind of jab that's intended to keep the other man out. Rather, it's the kind of jab that's intended to get you in. You double up on the jab and you step into it. You double up on what is a short jab. Emphasis on short jab. Not a long, stiff stick that can be countered, but two short jabs, two short ones that you step into. You want to keep the punches short with a concussive puncher like Deontay Wilder. You don't want to give that guy very many, if any, opportunities to fire something back at you. It's for this reason you keep the punches short, even the jab. You don't overcommit until you're in your desired range. So you double up on the jab to make sure he's covering up. Because so long as he's covering up to protect his face, he's not throwing punches at you. And that will allow you to step into your jab each time and get mid-range to inside on this guy. And once you're there, maybe you fire off a little left hook to the body. Maybe you go downstairs on this guy. You get this guy to drop his hands. Once he drops his hands, you go upstairs. And you let off the money punch that we haven't seen in a while. The uppercut. Now, for a long time, that was Anthony Joshua's money punch. Lest we forget, that's the punch that finished Vladimir Klitschko. It was all downhill after Anthony Joshua fired off that uppercut. Now, mid-range to inside, Deontay Wilder's vulnerable. I mean, that's where Eric Molina caught him with that left hook that frazzled him. Buckled him, you know? That's where that happened. Mid-range to inside. So I'd wager that mid-range to inside, a well-placed uppercut could split the guard and do a whole lot of damage. Get Wilder hurt. And the thing about Wilder when he's hurt is this guy doesn't instinctively clinch like some others do when they're hurt to try to smother the other guy's work, stop him from throwing all those punches. Wilder does not instinctively clinch when he's hurt. His methodology of surviving the onslaught is to cover up, throw the earmuffs on, and hang on for dear life. More often than not, whenever Wilder's been hurt by a shot, that's what he resorts to. And it's in those moments where the golden opportunity presents itself for you to really pour it on this guy. But in that moment, you don't just go throwing for the sake of throwing. You know, you don't just throw any old fucking thing out there. No, you maintain a bit of distance, a bit of spacing to add leverage, to add torque, to add power to the shots. Targeted shots, well-placed shots. Guy's already hurt. It's only going to take a few more to put him down. I mean, I'm telling you, mid-range to inside, a guy like Wilder,
That's where you can get him.
that's where you can get him.